What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and I'm bringing you guys another mock draft. It's Mock Draft Monday, so without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so coming in at number 1, we got the Chicago Bears, and I'm not going to be doing nothing fancy with this first pick. We all know it's going to be Caleb Williams, and for Bears fans out there, you should be happy because you guys are getting a good quarterback, and as a Giants fan, I'm very, very jealous. So we are going to be going with Caleb Williams there. I think him with Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and DeAndre Swift in the backfield now, I think that's a very, very good offense for a rookie quarterback to be going into. Not to mention, here at pick 9, we could also go offense here and improve it even more. So you have to stay tuned for that. But Caleb Williams is going into a perfect situation, at least for a rookie quarterback. So, it's very likely that he's going to succeed day 1. Moving on to number 2, though, we got the Washington Commanders. And this is where it gets a little bit more tricky. Do you go with Drake May, who I think is the second best quarterback in the draft, right behind Caleb Williams? Do you go with Jaden Daniels, former Heisman winner, who probably fits Cliff Kingsbury's offense the most and kind of is like a perfect puzzle piece into that Washington offense, but maybe isn't necessarily the best quarterback on the board? Or do you go with J.J. McCarthy, who has been rumored to be going with the second overall pick? The rumors seem like more than just rumors with the J.J. McCarthy hype. But I'm not going to do that to you Washington fans this time. I really do think it's a real possibility that it is Jaden Daniels. I think that fit is very, very nice. But I go Jaden Daniels a lot for the Commanders, so I'm going to go with Drake May, who I think the Commanders should be picking because I think he's the second best quarterback, and I don't necessarily think it's too close, although I do see the argument for guys like Jaden Daniels ahead of Drake May. Moving on to number 3 here, we got the Patriots, and this is a very kind of an unpredictable pick nowadays. I mean, the Patriots could trade down here and just, gather draft picks. They could go with the best player available, which is Marvin Harrison Jr., or they could go with their biggest need, which is quarterback, and go with the Jaden Daniels or J.J. McCarthy. If I was the New England Patriots, I would probably take a quarterback, and it would probably be Jaden Daniels. If I had to predict right now what I think the Patriots would do, I don't know. I think it's either quarterback or they trade down. I'm going to go with Jaden Daniels, though, because you got to jumpstart this rebuild with a really solid quarterback. And, looking into the future, next year's quarterback class, from the little I've, watched, it's not looking like a strong quarterback class. So why not get your guy, take that swing, that home run swing, get Jaden Daniels, and then fill out that roster with, day 2 picks. And, you always have next year to build too. This isn't going to be a 1-year rebuild. It's probably going to be a 2 or 3 year rebuild. So why not get Jaden Daniels in the building, have him develop, and when you're good enough in 2 to 3 years to compete, Jaden Daniels is going to be a very solid quarterback, ideally. Moving on here to number 4, we got the Arizona Cardinals. And, I feel bad for Cardinals fans because it's the same pick every time, almost, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't necessarily believe the Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze hype to go ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. I think that's a little silly. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best wide receiver prospect we've seen in a long time, so I think the Cardinals would be foolish to not go Marvin Harrison Jr. here. And they could also trade down as a possibility, but I really don't think you should when you're in position to take Marvin Harrison Jr. Now here at number 5, this is also a prime trade down spot. I think the Chargers are pretty likely to trade down here with teams like the Vikings trying to move up, the Broncos maybe trying to move up, although they don't necessarily have the draft capital. Maybe the Seahawks. Like, there's teams that could, really want to get up to this 5th pick. Mainly the Vikings. But with the top 3 quarterbacks off the board, I don't know if the Vikings would want to trade up all this way just to get a J.J. McCarthy. So I'm going to have the Chargers sticking and picking here. And you would think that they would want to go with either a Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. But Jim Harbaugh loves to run the ball. And what do you need to run the ball? You need a really good offensive line. And, they have a really good left tackle. But their right tackle in Trey Pipkins, he's serviceable, but he's not great. And with in my opinion, a blue chip prospect and Joe Alt sitting here, I think he could very easily slide over to the right side and play right tackle day one and be a top 10 to 15 right tackle in the league right away. So I think they're more likely to do that because in day two, the Chargers could very easily get a very solid wide receiver like maybe a Ladd McConkey, Xavier Legette possibly, Xavier Worthy. Like there's really good wide receiver prospects down the board. But there's not a blue chip prospect going to be here, in day two. So I'm going to go with Joe Alt here to the Chargers just because I really do think they're going to want to be a run heavy team with Jim Harbaugh, as head coach now. Moving on to number 6 here, we get the Giants, and with Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors still on the board, I think you got to go with one of those two guys. And it's really a toss-up for me. And as a Giants fan, I probably lean more Malik Neighbors, but if either one of these guys gets drafted to the Giants, I'm going to be extremely excited. So, Rome Odunze is more of that prototypical number one receiver, which the Giants are lacking. But Malik Neighbors, the Giants have had success with, quote unquote smaller LSU receivers, that 6', 5'11" range. Talking about Odell Beckham, obviously. So, I'm leaning more Malik Neighbors. I think the Giants may be leaning a little bit more Rome Odunze. I think it is a coin flip at this point, and I'm going to go with Malik Neighbors just because I slightly lean him over Rome Odunze. Now here at number 7. Number 7 is usually a pretty chalk pick here with Joe Alt going at number 7, but Joe Alt's off the board. He went at 5 to the Chargers. So now what do the Titans do? They could look to go with the second best offensive lineman, whether that's a Talise Fuanga, Troy Fatanu, J.C. Latham, Olufashanu. There's still really good offensive tackles on the board here at 7. But there's probably still going to be offensive tackles, really good ones, at pick 11. And I think the Vikings could possibly trade this pick, or trade up and get to the 7th pick and take J.J. McCarthy. So we're going to be sending 11 and 23 for pick 7. Now, don't worry too much about the trade details because this is only a first round mock draft. I don't necessarily think it'll just be 11 and 23 for 7 straight up. There's going to be some day 2, day 3 picks, pick swaps, maybe even next year picks. Like, it's going to be a little bit more complicated than this, but we don't need to make it that complicated since this is just a first round mock draft. So we are going to force this trade through. And now the Vikings are picking at 7 and the Titans are picking at 11 and 23. So here at here at number 7, this is going to be obviously a quarterback pick. You're not going to move up and, give up that much draft capital to not go quarterback. So we are going to go J.J. McCarthy here. And I really like J.J. McCarthy's fit with the Vikings just because they have Sam Darnold there for 1 year. So you don't necessarily have to start J.J. McCarthy right away, which I think would be a terrible idea. But I do think the Vikings need to get a quarterback in that building because you don't want Justin Jefferson, being unhappy and, wanting a trade or anything like that. Because if Sam Darnold's throwing him the ball for more than 1 year, I don't think Jetta is going to like that too much. So, get a young, promising quarterback in the building, have him develop, and hopefully either halfway through next season or maybe the year after that, have him start. Moving on to number 8 here, we got the Atlanta Falcons. And, I usually go defense here because in this mock draft at least, we have not gone defense at all. And with a defensive-minded head coach in Raheem Morris, you would think you would want his pick of the best defensive player in the draft. But I do that a lot. And so I want to switch it up a little bit and probably go offense here, even though I know that, Falcons almost always go offense when they're picking in the top 10. They got guys like Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Drake London. But why not get Rome Odunze as well? Kirk Cousins throwing to Rome Odunze, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and having Bijan Robinson in the backfield. I mean, who doesn't want to see that? This might not be the most realistic pick here, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And it's a really fun pick, so, I don't always want to go with the same picks for every single team, so we're switching it up there and going Rome Odunze to the Falcons. Now here at number 9, I think if Rome Odunze was still on the board here, I think the Bears would be running to the podium to draft him because Keenan Allen is, kind of a rental. He's not going to be there long term. So getting DJ Moore, a running mate in Rome Odunze, would have been really ideal here. They could also go Brock Bowers, although I don't know how realistic that would be. So I think that the Bears should either look to trade this pick because they really don't have many picks in this draft. Let's see, what do they have? Yeah, they have pick 9, pick 75, and then pick 122. So not many picks, so this could be a prime trade down spot. But when you have your pick of the first defensive player off the board here at 9, I think that's hard to pass up on. So we are going to look to go probably defense here. Now the question is, do you want to pair Jalen Johnson up with a really good cornerback and a Quinion Mitchell, maybe a Terrion Arnold, Nate Wiggins, or do you want to go edge rusher and pair Montez Sweat with a Jared Verse, a Dallas Turner, maybe a Leatu Latu? I think you go Dallas Turner here. He's a very, I don't want to say very raw prospect, but he is a raw prospect, but has a lot of upside. So having him and Montez Sweat, rushing the passer and then having a lockdown cornerback in Jalen Johnson, in the backfield, I think that's a very solid foundation for a really good defense. Moving on here to number 10, we got the New York Jets, and I think it would be really hard to pass up on a guy like Brock Bowers. They could go tackle here just for insurance because Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses are both up there in age. They're not guaranteed to play a full season, especially Tyron Smith. So you could look to go with the Olu Fashanu or a Talise Fuanga, Troy Fatanu, just as an insurance because, if one of those two guys goes down, it's not going to look good for him. But when you got a guy like Brock Bowers for Aaron Rodgers to involve in that offense, I think that's hard to pass up on. Having him, Garrett Wilson, and Mike Williams, that's a deadly receiving core. So we're going to go with Brock Bowers there to the Jets and just, keep piling on the weapons for Aaron Rodgers to throw to. Now here at number 11, we got the Tennessee Titans, and this is their first pick. They also pick at 23. And I think with this first pick, I think you got to still look offensive tackle here. I don't think that pick has changed. And luckily, we've had no offensive tackles since they traded down from 7. So they still have their pick of the best offensive tackle on the board, whether that's a Talise Fuanga, Troy Fatanu, or an Olu Fashanu, or a JC Latham, I guess. And I'm leaning more towards Troy Fatanu. I think he has solidified himself as a tackle, but if he doesn't, succeed at tackle, he can move into guard and be an all-pro guard. So we're going to go with Troy Fatanu. I think he has the most upside on this of all the offensive tackles still on the board, except for maybe, I guess, Amarius Mims has a really high upside as well, but I don't think you're taking Amarius Mims over some of these other guys. Now, picking here at number 12, we got the Denver Broncos, and they need a quarterback. I don't think you're walking into next season with Jarrett Stidham as your, starting quarterback. But is it too rich here at 12 to go Bo Nix, Michael Penix? I think so. I think that they would be looking to trade down here if they could. And there's a team I think that would be looking to trade up here. And that is the Cincinnati Bengals. Where are the Bengals at? There they are. I think it could look something like pick 18 and pick 97 for pick 12 and maybe like 145, something of that nature. So we're going to force that through again. Doesn't really matter. It's a first round mock draft. But now we got the Bengals picking at number 12. And I know they've signed Trent Brown, but I believe it was to a 1-year deal. He's not your, offensive tackle of the future. But you know who could be? Talise Fuanga. Just an amazing right tackle. I think he's developed a lot in his pass protection, and he's obviously a really good run blocker. That's what he thrives at. And I think his pass protection has caught up to him a little bit. So I think Talise Fuanga, in the next 3-4 years, once their rookie contracts are up, I think he could be, the best tackle in this class. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Moving on here to 13, we got the Las Vegas Raiders. And I think that they got to go defense here. And I think it could be cornerback. I think it's most likely cornerback. They got guys like Nate Hobbs and Jack Jones, but, they don't have any names that excite you in that secondary. And with, your pick of the best cornerback, whether that's a Quinion Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, Cooper DeJean, Nate Wiggins, you have your pick of the litter. And I think it's really between Quinion Mitchell and Terrion Arnold. That's more of what you prefer. Do you want a guy who's, thrives in off coverage with, maybe a little bit of press question marks in Quinion Mitchell? Or do you want Terrion Arnold, who's, really solid in just about everything and has really high potential, but maybe isn't as good as Quinion Mitchell is right now? I think it's a coin flip. I'm going to go Quinion Mitchell here because he is my number 1 cornerback in this class. I think he just thrives in off coverage, and I think he can play press man too. He showed that at the Senior Bowl. So I really do think Quinion Mitchell is arguably the most complete cornerback in this class. Him or Terrion Arnold. Moving on here to 14, we got the New Orleans Saints. And I think this has got to be offensive tackle. I know I go offensive tackle every time for him, but they need it. Ryan Ramczyk is, not looking great. His knee is, completely, off the rails. He might retire. He's not going to really come back the same, in my opinion. You also got Trevor Penning, who is looking more and more like a bust as the years go on. And I know he's, going into his third year, but it's just not looking good for him. And when you got guys like Olu Fashanu still on the board, J.C. Latham, Amarius Mims, I think you got to take at least a swing at one of these tackles. And I think it's a crime that Olu Fashanu, isn't looked at as a top 10 to 15 player anymore. I know he's got small hands. I know he struggles against power, but he's still a really, really good offensive lineman, especially in pass protection. So we're going to go with Olu Fashanu here. I think he's better than J.C. Latham, Amarius Mims, and all those guys by quite a big margin. So, in my opinion, getting Olu Fashanu at pick 14 is a steal. Now, moving on to 15 here, we got the Colts. And with Terrion Arnold still on the board, I feel like that's hard for the Colts to pass up on. They got guys like Juju Brents in the building. Kenny Moore still on the team, although he is getting up there in age and is a slot. But, man, with Brian Thomas and A.D. Mitchell still on the board, I mean, you got to get Anthony Richardson some weapons. I know you got, Michael Pittman signed a contract. You got Josh Downs in the slot. But you got to get Anthony Richardson all the weapons you can possibly get him, because, Anthony Richardson isn't known as the most accurate quarterback in the world. But if you surround him with receivers that get open with ease, I think Anthony Richardson is going to thrive and could potentially become a top 10 to 15 quarterback in the league next season. So we're going to go with Brian Thomas. I think he pairs up well with the receivers they already have. You have Michael Pittman being that, intermediate / physical receiver, that X receiver. Josh Downs in the slot who can get open with ease. And then Brian Thomas being that vertical deep threat. I think that's a perfect offense in my opinion. Moving on here to 16, we got the Seattle Seahawks. And, usually I go Troy Fautanu here, but he is off the board. So we're going to look to go with another offensive lineman most likely. But do you want to go tackle? Probably not. I mean, I'm a big fan of Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross. I think you could look to go Graham Barton because he has the tackle flexibility just in case Abraham Lucas doesn't, succeed expectations. But you have Jackson Powers Johnson here, who I think is one of the better interior offensive linemen we've seen in a little bit. So we're going to go with Jackson Powers Johnson here. He can play center. He can play guard. I mean, he can't play tackle, but, he has that flexibility on the interior of that offensive line that the Seahawks desperately need. Moving on here to pick 17, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if Brian Thomas is still on the board, I think that would be a very solid pick for the Jaguars. They lost Calvin Ridley. They really only have Christian Kirk. And I know they paid him a lot of money, but I don't like him as their number one receiver. But, you could go A.D. Mitchell here. I think that might be a little bit of a reach. And with Terrion Arnold still on the board, they need help in that secondary badly as well. So it's more, it comes down to who do you want, Terrion Arnold or A.D. Mitchell. I think Terrion Arnold's the better prospect, so we are going to go with Terrion Arnold there. Moving on to 18, now we got the Denver Broncos, and you move down a little bit, you gain a little bit of picks, and now you feel a little bit more comfortable going with either a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix. And, although I might be a little bit higher on Michael Penix, I think Bo Nix's fit with Sean Payton is, almost seamless. Bo Nix is the most experienced rookie quarterback coming into the draft ever. Like, I'm pretty sure he has the most college starts of any quarterback. I might be wrong on that, but I know he's got a lot, going back to his Auburn days. So, although he is a rookie, he's going to be going into Sean Payton's offense very experienced. So, we are going to go with Bo Nix there at 18. Moving on to 19, we got the Rams. And, they lost Aaron Donald to retirement. Their defense, besides maybe Kobe Turner and Byron Young, is looking very, very bleak. And I guess they got Tre'Davious White as well. But they still need help on that defense. It's not a very talented defense as a whole. I mean, you got guys like Jerzon Newton still on the board, Cooper DeJean, Leatu Latu, Byron Murphy, Jared Verse. Like, you have tons of defense still on the board here. I think you got to pick one of them. And Leatu Latu could be the pick here. He's got all the pass rush moves in the world. Like, he's got counters, he's got, everything. But Jared Verse just has, I don't know. There's just something about Jared Verse that I think the Rams would love. Pairing him up with Byron Young, kind of like Thunder and Lightning. I like that a lot, so we are going to go with Jared Verse there. Moving on to pick 20, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it's really between cornerback and offensive tackle. And looking at the cornerbacks, you got Nate Wiggins, Cooper DeJean, or you could go with offensive tackle, go J.C. Latham, Amarius Mims. I think that the tackle pool is a little bit better than the cornerback pool as of right now. So we are going to go offensive tackle here. I really don't think Dan Moore should be starting in the NFL anymore. So we're going to look to go J.C. Latham here. Pairing him up with Broderick Jones. I really like that. J.C. Latham is the definition of a hog molly. He's, just a massive human being who, has really good anchor, is amazing in the run game. I think that's a very good pairing alongside Broderick Jones, who's more of that, lanky, athletic offensive tackle. Moving on here to 21, we got the Miami Dolphins, and I usually like to go with offensive line here, but the wells kind of ran dry. I mean, you got guys like Amarius Mims, Graham Barton, I guess Tyler Guyton, but when you got Jerzon Newton just staring you in the face, you lost out on Christian Wilkins in free agency. I think just getting your replacement in ASAP is a really good idea. You got guys like what's his first name? Something Sealer. I really like him, but he's not he's not good enough to be the best guy on that defensive tackle room. So we are going to go with Jerzon Newton here. Moving on to 22, we got the Philadelphia Eagles. And I know I do it a lot, but Cooper DeJean just fits so well. He could play that slot cornerback role, have James Bradbury and Darius Slay on the outside, or he could slide up to safety and then have him and C.J. Gardner-Johnson in that safety room. I mean, Cooper DeJean's a Swiss Army knife, and that's exactly what the Eagles need. Moving on here to 23, we got the Titans' second pick. They went Troy Fautanu with their 11th pick. So here at 23, I think they're going to look to go defense here. And with Leatu Latu still on the board, the Titans need edge rush help. They don't really have anyone that excites me. I know they have Jeffrey Simmons on the inside, but when you look at that edge rusher position, really all they have is Harold Landry, and he's not the player he used to be. So getting a guy like Leatu Latu, who's a very polished pass rusher coming into the league, I think he's going to be the most productive edge rusher of this class, at least year one. Moving on here to 24, we got the Dallas Cowboys. And I think this has got to be an offensive tackle. You got to get your Tyron Smith replacement, especially when Amarius Mims is still on the board. I think Amarius Mims is kind of similar to Tyron Smith in a way. So getting that basically younger offensive tackle and help him develop is really ideal for the Cowboys, because I think he is kind of similar to Tyron Smith, and their offensive line has been depleted. They lost their center, Tyler Biadasz. They lost Tyron Smith, obviously. They need to get offensive line help, and Amarius Mims is best player available on that offensive line. Moving on here to 25, we got the Green Bay Packers, and I'm going to make a pick that apparently Packers fans love, which is Graham Barton. The Packers are always a difficult team to pick for because they're pretty solid everywhere. Their positions of need are positions you don't necessarily take in the first round, like linebacker and tight end. So I'm gonna go Graham Barton. Bolstering offensive line is always a really good idea, no matter who what team you are. So Graham Barton's a really good offensive lineman, very versatile, can play tackle, guard, or really center. I think he could play all positions if you really need him to, but I think he's best suited for that guard position. And with John Runyon leaving, I think he could slide in right and take his place. Moving on to 26, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and all of a sudden they need cornerback help pretty badly. And with Nate Wiggins still on the board, I think you got to go with either Nate Wiggins or Quillen McKinstry here. I'm a bigger Nate Wiggins fan. I know he's had a weird draft process so far. he had a really good 40-yard dash, but he came in super light. And from what I've heard, he came in, pretty heavy at his pro day, but is that going to be his playing weight? Probably not. So I don't know, but I think Nate Wiggins is definitely the better prospect ahead of Cooley McKinstry. So we are going to go to Nate Wiggins here. I think he could maybe suffer from, the same weight problem as Emmanuel Forbes did last season, but I think Nate Wiggins is more technically refined than Emmanuel Forbes was. Moving on to 27, we got the Arizona Cardinals. They went Marvin Harrison Jr. with the 4th pick. So now at 27, I think you got to look defense. And with Byron Murphy still on the board, Cooley McKinstry, I think you got to go with one of those two guys. Their defense is, lacking in a big way. They don't really have a pass rusher I feel confident in. I really like B.J. Ojulari coming out of LSU last season, but I don't think he's necessarily their answer to their pass rushing. So we are going to go with Byron Murphy. It's really hard to find a penetrating defensive tackle who's really good at rushing the quarterback. So getting a guy like Byron Murphy who is really good at rushing the quarterback is a really good pick there at 27. Moving on to 28, we got the Buffalo Bills. And, no more Gabe Davis, no more Stephon Diggs. Gotta go receiver here. Got to. And with A.D. Mitchell still on the board, I think A.D. Mitchell's a mixture between George Pickens and C.D. Lamb. And, getting a player like that here at 28 with Josh Allen throwing him the ball, I think he's going to thrive in Buffalo. Moving on to 29, we got the Detroit Lions. And I usually like going Zach Crazier here, but Cooley McKinstry is a very enticing pick here. They haven't had the best luck with their secondary this offseason. They missed out on L'Jarius Sneed, Cameron Sutton. Let's not talk about that. Cooley McKinstry would probably fit really nicely alongside Carlton Davis because, I just don't trust Amik Robertson to be that second cornerback. And they got Brian Branch in the slot. But I think Cooley McKinstry would start over Amik Robertson, day one. So, bolstering up that secondary, amazing pick for the Lions. Moving on here to 30, we got the Baltimore Ravens. And I think it's between two positions, really. They could go receiver or they could go tackle. Tyler Guyton is a very enticing pick for the Ravens. But also, they lost out on Odell Beckham. Rashad Bateman hasn't really been the receiver I thought he was going to be. Zay Flowers is a really good player. But he's, I don't know if he's a number one receiver. And I know Ravens fans are probably not going to like that. But when you got receivers still on the board like Ladd McConkey, Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson, Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette, I think you got to take one of these guys. And, when I first thought about it, I didn't think Ladd McConkey fit with the Ravens because they had, Zay Flowers. But they like to play Zay Flowers on the outside as well. And Ladd McConkey can also play on the outside. Neither one of those guys are slot-only receivers. So I think they would be able to switch, Zay Flowers in the slot, sometimes Ladd McConkey in the slot, and then other times they can have Zay Flowers on the outside or Ladd McConkey on the outside. I don't think that they pigeonhole themselves with taking Ladd McConkey. And, so we are going to go Ladd McConkey. I think he could create separation with ease and have Lamar Jackson just, feed him the ball. I would love that for the Ravens. Moving on to 31, we got the San Francisco 49ers. And I think this is a pretty obvious pick with how this, mock draft has fallen. And that's Tyler Guyton. Trent Williams is not going to be playing forever, although he's still playing at an elite level somehow in his 30s. But, Father Time's going to catch up to him at some point. So why not get a guy who's got, amazing upside, but maybe isn't the most polished, learn behind Trent Williams so that way he could take his role. And, whether that's a year from now, 2 years from now, it's going to happen eventually. So getting a guy in there early is a very good idea. And then with the last pick of the first round, we got the Kansas City Chiefs. And, with the whole Rashee Rice situation, we don't necessarily know what's going to happen with them. But I would doubt he starts the season, with the Chiefs. I think he's at least going to get suspended if he doesn't face jail time. So either way, I think that the Chiefs got to look receiver here because Hollywood Brown is a one-year rental. You thought you were going to have Rashee Rice. You might not have Rashee Rice now. So getting a guy like either a Troy Franklin or probably an Xavier Legette is the look here. I'm gonna lean towards Troy Franklin. I've always been super high on Troy Franklin. You know, he's a really smooth route runner. You know, didn't have the best 40-yard time. You would like to see it be a little bit better, but I still think he's a really good deep threat for Patrick Mahomes to throw to. So we are going to go Troy Franklin here to round out the first round. Alright, and this is the mock draft. Let me know what you guys think. I really like this mock draft. Let me know what you guys think, though, down in the comments. And if you like the video, consider subscribing. And as always, this is the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.